Won't it be Ryan the Great? And today we are talking the Philadelphia 76ers, guys. And it just was not a good year at all for the Philadelphia 76ers. At the current moment in time, let me look at this record. I mean, I know it is an unmitigated disaster. 23-45 for a team that was supposed to be a championship contender and all that. It just was a bad year for the Philadelphia 76ers after signing Paul George, after drafting Jared McCain, Embiid, Maxey with their new contracts, and re-signing Oubre and getting Caleb Martin, and just all these different types of things. We got, we had a championship level roster. We were just not able to put it all together. So yeah, let's just get right into the video. I'm also at the current moment in time, I'm looking at Mount St. Mary's versus American. They're a tournament game to get into the March Madness tournament. I obviously want to watch it too, and I didn't feel like filming this video tomorrow or Thursday, that being, which is when you guys will see this. That's obviously March Madness Day. So happy March Madness to everybody who celebrates, I guess you should say. But let's just get right into it. But before we get right into it, guys, make sure you guys subscribe with your post notifications on. Go subscribe to my Brother Living Great vlogs. Make sure you guys subscribe to my second channel at Right in the Combat Great. Make sure you guys go follow me on XR on the Great RTG. Make sure you guys go follow me on TikTok at Around the Great RTG. Make sure you guys go listen to the latest edition of the CR7 podcast. And make sure you guys go follow me on Twitch at Around the Great Podcast. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right into the video. And let's get started here. So, starting off, let's transition over to our first problem, first slide here. The biggest problems this season. Obviously, we had so many injuries, and at the end of the day, I don't know what you really can do about that. Embiid was always injured. He was missing back to backs, which obviously was a problem when it came to the team chemistry. Nobody was able to, really get accustomed to each other, playing with each other. This was a new team. We signed a bunch of new guys, like, Caleb Martin, like Paul George, and there are a bunch of others that, came in and tried to contribute. And when you don't really have, a training camp, guys were injured, and you don't really have time to, use part of the season to get accustomed to each other. That's obviously going to create a bit of problems. We've heard guys in the past saying, practices, there's not really that many practices during the season. So it really comes down to training camp and the games that help you get, accustomed to each other and really help your team chemistry. And that's not what the Philadelphia 76ers had this season. We had Paul George out in the beginning. We had Embiid out, and then eventually Maxey got injured. The only guy that was really doing something was Jared McCain. And that leads me into my next point here with this podcast P. I mean, listen, I don't really talk about stuff that happens off the court, but this felt like a distraction, to be honest with you. Now, listen, there are obviously podcasters in the NBA. Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart do it. Draymond Green does it. And, those guys are somewhat winning. You could say the Warriors aren't really winning, but, it is what it is. I'm not against guys doing it during the season. It's obvious it's an escape, and there are times we all need an escape for whether it's school, jobs, that's life. But when you are not producing in your actual job, which is, playing the game of basketball, then that's obviously going to come with a bit of problems. The Sixers were 2-12 at one point, and Paul George was saying, stuff about the players meeting and stuff like that. What was going on in there. Now, listen, I get that's going to get you some views and stuff like that, but you're a part of this team that's trying to compete, and at the time was 2-12. So, it just wasn't a good idea to say all that, and I think it hurt, some of the chemistry. And then obviously Jared McCain got injured, and it was a he was obviously our best player at the time because nobody was playing in the games. So but I don't disagree with his statement that Jared McCain shouldn't be their most consistent player. I mean, I understand where he's coming from. The guy's a rookie, and you have Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and Paul George himself on the team, and they weren't playing in games, and they weren't producing. Well, I don't know if I want to say not producing, but then again, they didn't have had like a 500 record when on the court with each other. So, you know, whether you want to argue whether they were producing or not is up for debate. But at the end of the day, the guy was a rookie, and he was, the best player pretty much on the team. And you don't. That's not really, unless it's somebody like the Wizards. That's that shouldn't be the case. So I understand what he was saying there. But then when he was talking about the players only meeting, I felt that was just a big problem. I think that hurt the team chemistry for a team that was struggling. So. I don't really know. At the end of the day, it is what it is. It was at the time, but after he said that about the struggling and stuff like that. What was going on in the players meeting. He should have shut the show down then. The biggest problem is when when he shut down the show after the Sixers were like 17 games under 500. What the hell are you going to do then if they were 17 games under 500? Really doesn't make that much sense to me. What the plan was with this podcast over the season. I love podcasts. I have one of my own. Um, that's obviously what I do, but I'm not playing the game of basketball with it, and you shouldn't be really doing this podcast if you're not producing on the court. So, at the end of the day, not much you can do anymore. Back then, definitely something should have been done about it, but now all you can really do is just shake your head. But yeah, I mean, the injuries was the biggest problem, and in turn, you don't have any team chemistry. Guys aren't playing in back to backs. Load management, I don't believe works because when it comes to the playoffs, you need to, your stars need to play with need to be like, have some chemistry with the role players because in the playoffs, role players are kind of, the biggest thing. Some of the biggest players, some of the biggest contributors in those playoff games, especially at home. So you need to have some chemistry with your role players, when you get to the playoffs. And obviously, the Sixers just didn't have that. So anyway, let's move on to our next slide here. What's next for the Philadelphia 76ers? Now, obviously, the season hasn't ended yet, but the Sixers are currently tanking games, and it's kind of obvious based off the fact that we are 22 games under 500, and the current injured list is Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, Kelly Oubre, Adem Boma, Kyle Lowry, Lonnie Walker, Gershom Yabusele, and I'm sure I'm missing a few others. That's the current injured list. So obviously the Sixers are not going anywhere, so we should obviously be thinking about what's next. Obviously, the team is tanking right now. There is no doubt about that. This is a team that is, once again, 22 games under 500, and they are obviously going nowhere as the season comes to a close. So what's next for the Philadelphia 76ers? There have been talks about Joel Embiid getting traded for the millionth year in a row. I'm obviously exaggerating. It's probably like the third or fourth year in a row. There's talks about Paul George being traded. I all think it depends on where you end up in the NBA draft. And obviously I have draft expectations and I have the CBS's draft prospects ranking in front of me. The biggest problem with the Sixers is, and I think that's something that they've realized, is they need to lose games or they're gonna lose their draft pick. If their pick is not inside the top 6, then they're gonna lose their draft pick. And this is a draft with very exciting and very good prospects. You look at the thing I have up right now. You have Cooper Flag, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, Jack Alunas. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Edgecombe and Trey Johnson as well. I'm a big fan of Trey Johnson, but I think Ace Bailey fits the Philadelphia 76ers a bit more. And realistically, with the way the draft lottery is set up, the Sixers are really only going to get from maybe pick 4 to 6. It's very, very unlikely that they get the number 1 overall pick and have the possibility to select Cooper Flag, saying he does go into the NBA draft. But I mean, I don't know. I just don't think he wants to go to the team like the Wizards. But and I think that's part of the reason the Sixers shut down Paul George, that they know that they have to lose games or they're going to end up losing their draft pick in a draft class that is, pretty stacked. So, I mean, do you trade Paul George or Embiid? The point I'm trying to get back to. I don't know, honestly. I think, like, if you draft Ace Bailey, whose comparison is Paul George, then maybe you should trade him away, or maybe you have to move him to the 4 spot. I don't really know. I mean, listen, Paul George is obviously, not had a great year. And he obviously had some injury problems. And you can't, I mean, was he injured? Yes. Could his legs have been a problem? Yes. He didn't really have his legs under him. But, I try to make the comparison here to Nick Castellanos, who, didn't have a great first year in Philadelphia when, they got to the World Series, and he was one of the biggest problems. Um, his batting average was not from what it was on the Cincinnati Reds. Then the next year he comes out and he's batting over 300. So it might just be he needs to get accommodated with the city and the team and his new home. And life is outside. These guys have lives outside of the sport at the end of the day. So I'm just thinking, is it really worth it to trade Paul George? Maybe he just needs another year with or maybe he just needs a second year to really, get acclimated and get accommodated and all that to the city and the team and the fans and stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily sure. When it comes to Joel Embiid, honestly, I mean, you might have to pull the trigger. It's so hard for me to say just because of the fact how great he is when he's on the court. But guess what? The biggest problem is that he's never on the court. I just absolutely hate it. Listen, the guy last year in the playoff series against the New York Knicks averaged 30 points per game in 7 games with one leg. Literally, the guy wasn't playing on 2 legs. He could barely jump to get a rebound. So you look at what he's able to produce when he's on the floor, but there is just so many times where he isn't on the floor, and we don't even know if he's going to be able to be on the floor for the rest of his career because he just seems like he's broken goods right now based off of what we've seen from him over the course of the last few years. Once again, when he's on the court, he is one of the top few players in the NBA. There is no doubt about it. He's like Kevin Durant, Hakeem Olajuwon, amongst others. But, he's just never on the court and he can never find a way to stay healthy. His knees are just, I don't know. There's just, I don't really know what the problem is. But do you trade him? At this point, you might have to. Not just because of the fact of a basketball thing, but when the city of Philadelphia, the fans, if they don't believe in you anymore, which is what I think the case is with Joel Embiid, then you cannot play here. Um, the Sixers, if there's a player out there and the fans don't like you and they don't believe in you, then they're just not going to get behind you. Now, I'm not saying that Joel Embiid doesn't put a bunch of effort into it because it seems like he's putting a lot of effort into playing games. Same thing with Paul George. I mean, the guy was getting injections just to play in games. So I'm not trying to accuse them of not putting an effort of trying to not playing games. Now, obviously, that's been a common criticism throughout their careers, but I really do think they were trying to, play in these basketball games and trying to win a championship. But I don't know. I think you should. I honestly think you should maybe keep Paul George, but I do believe you should take Ace Bailey because of the fact that I think he might need some time to develop into becoming a star in the NBA. And by the time Ace Bailey's in his prime, what's he, 19 years old, something around there? He's only a freshman in in college. So I think if you look at him, by the time Paul George is gone, Ace Bailey might be developed into a star. So he's my number one guy for the Philadelphia 76ers, unless we're able to get the number one pick and take Cooper Flag. I would really like to get Ace Bailey. Dylan Harper, we obviously have Maxey, Jared McCain, and those guys are going to be around for a long time. So there's not really much time for time for them to be incorporated into the lineup. Same thing with Edgecombe as well. Dylan Harper. I just mentioned Dylan Harper. Or I say Ace Bailey twice. I think I meant to say Dylan Harper. I don't know. Either way, I don't think Dylan Harper, maybe Trey Johnson, Edgecombe, and guys like that, I don't think they'll really have time. Or I don't think they'll really have the opportunity to become stars on this team based off the fact that there would be guys in front of them. And that will probably be the case for years to come. I know there's some center out of Duke. He's like 7'2", but I don't think he's within top 5 worthy, which is what I'm hoping the Sixers get into. So I really wouldn't necessarily want to take him. Maybe go with the center in the second round. I'm not necessarily sure. I don't know if you re-sign Drummond for another season. But yeah, another thing that I have on here is if we should fire Nick Nurse. I don't believe we should. I hope he doesn't get scapegoated. It doesn't look to be that way. There has been no signs of him potentially getting fired. But the guy doesn't even have a consistent lineup. They're for an hour away from the game. He's getting information on who's playing and who's not playing. So how is he supposed to come up with a game plan on a daily basis when he doesn't even know who's going to be playing in the next game? So I don't blame Nick Nurse at all. The injury bug really hit this team. It's been hitting this team for the past couple of years. But this it's just not a good season, and I don't think Nick Nurse should be punished for it. I like the guy. He's a very good coach. Obviously he's won a championship before, but he should not be fired because of the fact that nobody can stay healthy on this team and he doesn't have the opportunity to come up with a consistent game plan. All right, let's move on here. Yeah. Our final slide here. Why Daryl Morey needs to go. I'm going to change transition here. When it comes to Daryl Morey, right? How do I word this? When it comes to Daryl Morey, he obviously did an incredible job building the Rockets into a championship contender. He traded for James Harden, fleeced the Thunder into giving them James Harden. Didn't, all for over $4 million or whatever the contract dispute was with the Thunder and James Harden. And he got Chris Paul, and when Chris Paul didn't work out, he won a Russell Westbrook. He got him Russell Westbrook, and he consistently tried to, build a team around James Harden. And I feel like that was the biggest problem with the Sixers, as Daryl Morey has been here. Everything, he just seemed like he wanted to get James Harden the whole time. That was the whole thing. And when he got James Harden, he went out and got players that James Harden was accustomed to that offseason. He signed PJ Tucker, Eric Gordon. What about the best player on the floor, who was Joel Embiid? Joel Embiid was better than James Harden, was better than James Harden at the time. And James Harden made an All-Star team this year. He's played great, but at that time, Joel Embiid was a better player than James Harden. Everybody and their grandmother knows it. So why was Daryl Morey so focused on putting players around James Harden? It really didn't make that much sense. Then you look at you just look at the I don't know, the decision making. The guy doesn't really seem to know what he wants for the team. It just seems like he's making stuff up as he goes along. He tried to help out Ben Simmons. Well, it's clear Ben Simmons didn't want to be here from the beginning. From when you were trying to trade him. You tried getting him back on the team. It's clear Ben Simmons just did not want to play for the Philadelphia 76ers. And even when you traded Ben Simmons, you could have had the opportunity to get Tyrese Halliburton. And you could have had Halliburton and Maxey. That would have been a great duo, in my opinion. Those guys move the ball around. They shoot well. They can get to the rim. You could have had Halliburton, and you decided to trade for James Harden. Now, obviously, I wanted James Harden at the time. But, the guy who is making decisions for a professional basketball team should know a little bit more than, the analyst or so-called analyst talking at tables. So, that he should have been able to figure that out. And it just seems like he never knows what he wants. We're all in on Embiid. Now and then there's times where it looks like we're not in on Embiid. What do you call it? We trade for guys. We sign guys. We sign guys like Caleb Martin. Well, they're gone by, it's a 4-year contracts, and they're gone by the trade deadline. We signed Paul George. He talked about how the Philadelphia 76ers were talking about him as the piece to winning a championship, the missing piece. And now, there's cheese and trade rumors. It just never seems like Daryl Morey knows what he wants for the team. And, I remember last year when he was talking about changes coming to the team. Yeah, you made change, but it seems like you just want to blow it up again. I honestly don't know what he's doing. He just doesn't seem to know what he wants. And it's honestly getting to be a bit ridiculous. Figure out what you want for the team, man. I don't know. It's an honest disaster. I think Mora needs to go. The Sixers were fine without him. And then we brought him here for I don't know what reason. I don't know what Elton Brand did that was so wrong. Even though he drafted Markel Fultz, I mean, that was really only his one big blunder. And it really wasn't even his fault. Markel Fultz had one of the weirdest and most uncommon shoulder injuries we've ever seen to have known. So, that obviously was a big blunder, but what can you do? I don't know. It just seems like Daryl Morey just doesn't know what he wants for the team, and it doesn't really. And we're not any closer to a championship than we were 5 years ago. I said that last year. We were not any closer to a championship than we were a few years ago. So, bottom line, I mean, you can run it back with this team as long as they're able to stay healthy. And obviously, Embiid going to the Olympics was another thing. I forgot to bring that up. But we have to find a way to stay healthy. These guys are. We have how many games left in the season? It's March right now. Embiid, George, Maxey, and all the rest of the crew. They have until October or September or whenever training camp starts to suit up and rest up and train in the off season and just get ready for the season. You have that much time, and if we can't stay healthy next year, then honestly, the whole thing should be blown up. Because I am so tired of every year saying Joel Embiid, so and so wasn't healthy. That's why we couldn't win. Run it back next year. We're running out of time to say that, and that's the problem. So you want to run it back next year, fine. If you don't, and you want to go with something new, you want to trade Joel Embiid, fine. But at this point, you got to make a decision. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision on Joel Embiid because of the fact that he is getting older and his knees are not getting any healthier. You have to make a decision soon, and that's what I'd have to say. I'd say keep Paul George. We haven't given him enough time. Obviously it was 1 year, and I think that we need to. I think we need to at least give him a year. We need to give him at least a chance to, prove himself in another year. Everybody deserves second chances. At least that's what they say. So yeah, guys, that's my thought on the. That's my really overview of the season. I obviously haven't talked much about the Sixers just because they've been so irrelevant, and every video would turn out to be like this. But we'll have an off-season guide, or what I think they should do in the off-season by you know when we actually get to the off-season after the regular season concludes, and yeah, we'll have a little bit more of a deep dive going into that. So yeah, that'll do for this video. Make sure you guys subscribe with the post notifications on. Go subscribe to my brother Living the Great Vlogs. Make sure you guys go subscribe to my second channel at Run the Combat Great. Make sure you guys go follow me on X at Run the Great RTG. Make sure you guys go follow me on TikTok at Run the Great RTG. Make sure you guys go listen to the latest edition of the CR7 podcast. And make sure you guys go follow me on Twitter at Run the Great Podcast. And as always, Ryan the Great out. Peace.